Yeah, so I know that sounds a little abrupt to us, but on the live stream, it kind of fades out. So
Right.
the actual consumer doesn't hear like that craziness. But anyway, hey, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Members Only, Episode 2. Tonight we have with us Roidie McDouchebag. Welcome.
Good to be here.
I'm glad we finally got this working, man. It's been trials and tribulations.
Yes, yeah. I figured it was worth having stuff that didn't sound more awful than it already does. So, I hope this doesn't sound too bad, and I don't sound like I'm inside a tin can. But anyway, I was actually thinking, like, well, you guys just did the police shootings episode, or just put it out,
Right. Yeah,
and
that was a great episode.
yeah, it was. It was like I think it was really informative from you know like having sort of an inside track from someone who actually knows what they're talking about. But it also, I think too often when you got somebody who's involved in law enforcement talking about those things, like they're they're pretty biased, and that's pretty natural. But in this case, it's nice to have somebody who's got a pretty reasonable, middle of the road viewpoint, and an actual suggestion for a solution, which I almost never actually hear from anyone in that debate. It's either ridiculous on one end or the other, really polarized. I mean, people are getting shot and dying, so makes sense. People are angry about it, but to be able to take a charged subject like that and break it down that way, that was cool. I figured I might chime in a little because I've been on the other end of that. Thankfully, I haven't been shot, but a couple times I have been in situations where I had a bunch of officers drawing on me.
Oh, that's got to be terrifying.
Yeah, oh, it was. And the thing is, here's what's really terrifying. When you see that they are terrified.
Oh, yeah, because you don't know how they're going to react.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's where I, thinking about that, going over the way that I was very, by necessity, I, quickly in both situations did everything that I could to calm them down. Just so that I've always thought, in any time that I deal with the police, I've always thought, like, ultimately they have a gun and the right to use it, and I don't really have a leg to stand on if they decide that's the case. So I just proceed with, not thinking that that's where it's going to go to, but just knowing that it could. So really, don't antagonize this. It's like poking a bear.
Right. So absolutely the best thing that you can do in a situation like that, if you're dealing with law enforcement, and again, this is not legal advice, ladies and gentlemen. This is just us bullshitting on the internet. But, absolutely, if you're in a situation where law enforcement is drawing down on you, the best thing that you can do is be compliant and just understand what your rights under the law in whatever jurisdiction that you are in are, right? So, lay down, submit, and ask for a lawyer, right? If you're in the
exactly. U.S. Like the time for, the legal wrangling is really not in that moment where, things are dangerous, people are scared. And then, so, like, coming back to that, when I saw, like, there were 3 officers in front of me when I answered the door, I knew that they were kind of, like, I knew why they were there. I knew that they were there for me, but they didn't realize that the person answering the door was me. They didn't, I don't think they had a good description. So when I said, like, hi, I'm Roidie, then they immediately, like, jumped out of their skin, jumped back physically, and all drew. And then I was like, like, well, okay, and then, let me see your hands, So then, I put my hands up. Then my friend's dog started getting out the door. So I had to be like, okay, now the dog is getting out and he'll run away. So I'm going to shoo him back inside. I'm going to use my hands to do that because I can see that this is like an old man, a frail, like, 20-year-old guy, and then a woman. And so that was actually one thing that I'm surprised he didn't touch on much. I mean, aside from just saying in general they need better training, but they need to know how to physically fight, I think. Like, they should do more, like, hand-to-hand training. Not necessarily because you want to have to do that all the time, but it just having the confidence that you can if you have to. I've met a few cops that came from that perspective, and they didn't get nervous. Like, they're just calm, confident. They keep their cool. But when you have people who are, feel physically threatened and aren't physically capable, don't have the training, and the training they do have is just limited to, reach for the tools in your belt, then you're going to reach for those tools.
Right. So that's an interesting point. So, guns are a great equalizer, but they're also a great crutch, right? So
yes, exactly. So that's where, and the thing is, when you just have someone who's, they have that fear in them, and then they're now in a situation where they've got their finger on the, or trigger, like, you don't want a scared person in that circumstance, or at least, there's some natural, nerves that anyone's gonna have, but you want somebody who can handle that, and they don't feel way out of their depth. And I actually I got to talk to I think he's retired now, but he was the local firearms instructor for the RCMP detachment here, and he said basically that same thing about, like, they just don't have adequate training in the other areas, just like Derek was saying about like the de-escalation and the, like, everything surrounding the use of force, as opposed to just and then you skip to use of force. Like, you got to be able to talk people down and feel like that's a reasonable possibility that you can do that. If you don't, like, with the way it is now, the training that they have, they either just pick that up on their own, or and unlike, say, training martial arts, which is, that's at least a sort of common activity in society, de-escalation techniques aren't really, like, that's not a class that you're going to have a handful of friends that go and do just for fun.
Right.
So to just come upon that without putting a bunch of effort into it isn't realistic, and it's pretty, like, ridiculous to expect that you're going to have officers take a bunch of their own time and go and do that stuff. Like, that should be either, like, I think on the, like, the initial training process should have a lot of that in it, but ongoingly, I think they should just do more paid training. Like, I would be happy if officers spent a couple hours a week doing, hand-to-hand, or just, even lifting weights and doing cardio, so that they feel physically confident and they are capable.
Well, in my experience, a lot of them do. I train with, well, I'm not training this year, I guess, because I'm a lazy bastard that has real life obligations. But, when I was actively training over the last decade plus, we frequently had, Broward sheriffs and Palm Beach sheriffs that were training with us, and local municipality cops that were coming in. And that was their workout for the week, but it was also giving them some tactical tools that they could use in a less lethal situation than just pulling a firearm and shooting somebody.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I think when you're not just basically competent in hand to hand, but once you become more of an expert, or even just a few levels above the average person, like, even if you're just a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, or you spent a couple of years training, that puts you far enough ahead that you then have the luxury not to just pound someone into a pulp to make them submit. Like, you can just put them down and hold them there and make them feel helpless, and they sooner or later usually comply.
Yeah, so, like, you mentioned like a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, even a white belt in jiu-jitsu is going to be more competent more confident in their ability to get something done in a hand-to-hand scenario than anyone that hasn't trained. And so, a lot of times we talk about, competition between different belt levels or something like that. But in a real life self-defense scenario, you're looking at, somebody that has trained versus probably somebody that hasn't. And so that is a big, big advantage.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. They do have to be prepared because, especially when, well, I guess MMA here, I don't know about in other communities, but around here, I'm pretty sure the first black belt in jiu-jitsu that came to the province to teach, like, the Hells Angels flew him in and they built their own gym, and they would just have these high level guys from Brazil and stuff in the 90s come up here and teach them.
That's actually really interesting because I'm sure you're aware, and probably many of the listeners, both of them, are aware that the Hell's Angels have kind of a very storied and troubled past, not just for their own actions, but from the perspective of them being a motorcycle club, which is generally considered an illegal activity in the United States.
Yeah. Here they've actually been fighting some legal battles recently, pertaining to whether or not they're going to just criminalize membership, period. Like, just treat it the same way they would treat, like, membership in a terrorist organization or whatever. You're openly declaring that you aren't going to obey the law and you're actively engaged in, violent crime and so on. So, I thought it was, when I realized that, I thought it was interesting that, these guys, like, if that's the training they have, then you really would like your officers who might have to deal with those guys to have a similar level of training. Like, that should be the minimum that you aspire to, is being one step above the criminals you're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
But for the average encounter, it's not going to be like that. You're not dealing with the cream of the crop. It's just, I think with, I'm sure there's issues, down there with, like, gangs doing similar things. Like, if your life revolves around violence and fighting, you're probably going to want to be good at violence and fighting. But, anyway,
well, so let me ask you, and you're under no obligation to answer, right? And this is totally at your own choice. But so there was a situation where a bunch of armed cops showed up to your door. Can you talk about that situation?
Okay. So, well, that time I had.
That time?
and I will.
We're going deep now.
Caveat that I do not have a criminal record. We don't have, like, we don't have the same criminal code here, so we don't have, like, felonies or whatever. It's just you're a convict or not. I've never been charged with anything.
Well, that's a good start.
Yeah, but I had a bad breakup, and I had I had thought, okay, I'm gonna take a bunch of LSD and think about whether, like, what I should do with my life and whether this is a good relationship. But I made the mistake of talking to my ex-girlfriend while I was high about that.
You drunk dialed.
I had no filter at all. I said a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have said, And then basically she was, oh yeah, and then I ended it after saying, like, basically, like, this is a horrible relationship and I don't really like you, but it would be really inconvenient to have to, like, find a new apartment and stuff, so I guess I should probably stay with you. And then she didn't like that. I can't imagine why. And then, and then she was like, no, you know what? Fuck you. I'm dumping you. And then, so, like, when people talk about, like, I heard people talk about, like, oh, you could have a bad trip on acid and, like, you'll see a bunch of scary things. No. A bad trip on acid is you break up with your girlfriend and spend 6 hours crying. That is a bad trip. That is one of the worst experiences of my life. Anyways, after I was done doing that, then she was packing her stuff. Now it's like the next morning, and my mom came over. She showed up unannounced, and in the middle of me arguing with my ex, and then that made it even more fun. So I just turned to my ex and I was like, "Bye, I'll never see you again." And I think she took that to mean, like, I was gonna, like, maybe I was gonna.
She took that as a threat for whatever reason.
Some kind of a threat, as opposed to just me saying, like, you're packing your shit. Obviously, this isn't going to work out, and, like.
Okay, well, that's not sensational.
It was pretty dumb, and I. Like, so then then I took off to my friend's house, wouldn't answer any phone calls for, like, a couple hours, pretty upset. And then when I did answer, the cops had been called, and they were like, and they were with my ex, and then I talked to one of them, and he's like, yeah, we'd just like to come and talk to you and make sure everything's okay. And I was like, I see where this is going.
Yep.
And so... yeah, then that, oh yeah, and it was really embarrassing too, because then they did put me in cuffs, and, like, once I shooed the dog back in and all that crap was over, oh yeah, and then I saw the other 4 of them at the road, who all, like, by the time the door opened, they already had drawn, because, the other thing is, like, I always carry a knife, that's something I've done for a long time, so they had a report that, I'm a trained martial artist, I'm armed, and I may be high on acid, and and so it was just comedy of errors, and so then I like they're taking me to the cop car. This is in front of my friend's house, so I was like, great, a couple of my friends lived there. This is really embarrassing, and then.
Oh wait, so so at this point you're crashing at, like, a buddy's apartment or something.
Well, no, I had left my place. I just went over there to be like, oh fuck, I broke up with my girlfriend.
Oh, okay.
And, right. Like, so then, yeah.
Well, still, so this wasn't like this wasn't like your people, like your neighbors that you had to be embarrassed.
No,
this is in front of your friends and all of their neighbors.
Like my friends that I, like, trained with. And,
oh man, that is
one
awful.
of them was actually the coach. My coach at the time. So it was a pretty cool time for me, I tell you what. And then this is where I figured out a couple of things. So I never knew this, but cops always put on the handcuffs too tight, and then if you're not an asshole, by the time they're gonna put you in the car,
they'll
ask you if they're too tight, and they'll loosen them, and they also won't smack your head off the roof as they put you in. So, because I had friends that
unless they're on camera,
and what's that?
Unless they're on camera.
Yeah, well, if you're resisting, then sometimes you just need to stop resisting.
Well, yeah, all's fair in love and war.
Like I think as long as they say something like oh no, he's got a gun, and then or like I like one officer that I talked to, and I mean, this is on camera and stuff, and as he was about to put the guy into the car, this is like a known local gang member, not a nice guy, and the guy was like, hey, how's your daughter doing at blah 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 address? And then when somebody who's like that says something like that, you kind of know what they're implying, and so he was like, oh, and he kind of slipped all of a sudden as he was about to put him in there, and his elbow just came down and crashed into the back of the guy's head, and he bounced it off the off the roof as they were going in, and it was just really unfortunate. He tripped right at that moment. So even if you're on camera, accidents happen sometimes. So
well, they do, and so kind of. I think that a lot of the stuff. Wow, listen to that echo. Wow, huh? So I think a lot of the stuff that we see is over sensationalized. Here's a bad thing that happened with a cop. But I think, most cops are out there just trying to do the right thing and for the most part, being good guys.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I spent a long time on the other side of that argument, just being kind of an angry teenager till I was about 30. And, and so, fuck the police, and they're there to oppress us, and I did have some pretty unsatisfactory dealings with them where I needed help and they were very unhelpful. But over time, I realized, and through talking to different officers and other experiences, it was the system did kind of screw me, but that really had nothing to do with any one of the individual officers. They, often their hands are tied. They can't do a lot. They're really there to, kind of maintain order and clean up messes and provide some deterrence. But as far as actually being able to stop bad things from happening, they're just not going to be there most of the time. They're going to be there after the bad thing happens.
Right. They're batting cleanup.
Yeah, and the annoying thing here too is that even though it's written into the law that you can get a permit to concealed carry for protection of life, they functionally only allow that in the wilderness against bears. Which is wonderful. I mean, it's nice to be able to, if you're out working in the bush and you don't want the extra weight of carrying a shotgun, you can carry, 44 Magnum or whatever, and awesome. But as it turns out, I have mostly been able to, shoo bears away with my voice. And sometimes that doesn't work on people. So, I think it's pretty silly the way that, you guys, from my perspective down there, especially in anywhere where you can open carry, I think it's reasonable basically in the right setting, for example, you're on your way to go hunting, but if you're just walking around with a carbine slung over your shoulder just to be I have a gun, look everyone, it just, I just find it kind of absurd.
Okay, so those guys are kind of interesting to me, because they're actually not doing anything wrong when they're doing that.
No, it's not wrong. I just think it's silly.
Maybe it is silly, but is it more silly to be the person on the other side that doesn't understand that, hey, what they're engaging in is lawful activity?
Yes, I think that, and actually, even here, you can't carry around a loaded gun in town, except for some very you basically. You could have a loaded gun, but you would have had to have loaded it because something happened that called for it. You can't just have it loaded walking around. But it is perfectly legal to, like, I could grab my Tavor and walk downtown with just holding it, and I'm sure the SWAT team would show up, but I would not be doing anything illegal. And that's the difference between, here and there, is that even the cops don't necessarily, I mean, they might know what the law is and just not care, or, because everybody around them does not, they're going to panic and the cops are going to have to respond to that.
Right. So we have this, real large social discrepancy, at least in the States. I'm not sure about up in the northern territories there where you're living. But so, people don't understand that having a gun is legal most of the time, that displaying your gun is legal a lot of the time. And so you have this fear, people have this fear, and it's really, I'm hesitant to use the word, but it's this, this fear of fascism where, you've got this authoritarian kind of thing going on where, cops can have guns, but you can't have a gun.
Yeah. And I think I've, like I say, I got pretty frustrated at one point with, basically it was like, I had a legitimate fear for my safety, and there was no legal basis for me to, to carry a gun. If I did that and for any reason got caught with it, that would be, a serious issue for, between me and the cops. Like, that's a federal charge here, so that's a minimum of 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
That is, we've gone ridiculously overboard, towards gun control. And just recently we had an election. For some reason, we elected an actor that wasn't good enough for Hollywood again as prime minister. And I do.
All of our best actors, at least the comic actors, they all seem to come from Canada. That's I find that really interesting, actually.
Yeah, well, I think in Montreal they got the Just for Laughs festival, so that helped, I think, Canadian comedy kind of get on the map.
But you can go back decades. So go back to the days of Second City TV. A lot of those guys and gals were Canadian. You've got Kids in the Hall. Wow, those guys were awesome. I love those guys.
Yeah.
Jim Carrey, I think.
The stuff Kids in the Hall would do for the day, it was like holy shit, they can do that on TV. It was one of those kind of shows. It wasn't just Saturday Night Live, they had a few moments like that once in a while, but Kids in the Hall, it was just.
Well, that's something that I've talked about this on the forum. So I had a visa to work in Canada for many years, and I posted my visa on the forums at one point. Just to prove that, yes, I actually did this. So I used to, either fly or drive into Toronto, and I would do my work. And one of the things that I always found really interesting was that you could go on CBC, whatever, right? And they've got full nudity and people having sex on broadcast television.
Yeah, so this was in the 2000s?
This would be in the late 90s kind of thing.
Yeah. So, it was funny because that's when that happened, basically. When we got our cable stations, then it was weird because I don't really know, like there was not like most stations wouldn't do that, but if you wanted to basically, you had to do it at a pretty late
Yeah, it was like 9, 10
time
o'clock at night.
slot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then and have all the following program may contain sexually explicit scenes, blah 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 blah. But yeah, then you could just be like, there's people pretty much fucking.
Yep.
And but like unfortunately though, it was like this sort of like artsy fartsy kind of network that did that stuff. So it usually wasn't cool. It'd just be like, it'd be like, here's some people having weird sex that you never knew existed. Like not like anything that, the average person wanted to see. So
well, so I remember very specifically because this is when what was that Lars von Trier movie before Dancer in the Dark. Hold on, I got to look it up.
Okay. Oh yeah, and as far as movies went though, yeah, like especially like foreign films that just had a lot of sex scenes, that was fair game.
So I gotta look this up. It was Breaking the Waves. Oh man, I love that movie. Emily Watson. Wow, she's so hot. Hold on, I'll pull it up and I'm gonna bring it. I'm gonna bring it over on screen here. Yeah, here you go. So this is I'm not sure where they were living, but he was working on like an oil rig in the North Sea or something, and she was kind of like sort of mentally ill or some kind of thing like that, but she fell in love with this guy, and I mean, what a wonderful story, first of all, and then like just the cinematography was fantastic, and I watched this while I was staying in the Royal York.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I was like, wow, they can show that on TV here. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's it's weird that you couldn't. I mean, like that's always been kind of strange to me. The stuff that you could show in American, on American TV, and especially like thinking about, say, like, even like Indiana Jones in the 80s. It was a PG movie, and it was like, you get like people's heads getting blown off, and like, all this kind of just horrific violence, but a nipple. If you show a nipple, or like God for fucking bid, a vagina. Like that's or an asshole. Like that, just people's heads would explode.
Oh yeah, that was instant R rating.
Yeah, instant R rating, and not even like, I mean, like, can you imagine in the 80s just a movie where you saw somebody's asshole? Like, what? It wouldn't even have been just an R rating. Like it would have been like 5 theaters across the nation that actually would show it. Like everywhere else, it'd be like, you'd have like Christians out in the street in front of it, like picketing and all that kind of crap. Like, I don't know. That's just.
So there was this comedian. I can't remember exactly who it was, but I'm pretty sure he was an American comedian. But he was describing kind of the difference between like a PG-13 movie and an R-rated movie in America, and the difference was that a PG-13 movie would have all of the violence and bad words, but none of the sex.
Yeah.
And it's like, like the one thing that is, natural and endemic to humanity is having sex, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's like,
and that's the thing that you want to keep away from people.
and I mean, like, I would say in most cases, you would hope that most people go through their whole life without having to shoot a bunch of people. And that wouldn't really be a behavior you want to reinforce too much. But you would also hope for, the sake of their happiness and a fulfilling life that most everyone will have sex at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So, just like that, it's like.
Well, and now you got this incel thing where you've got the people that aren't having sex that are going around killing people.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can understand, that kind of, I think it's that kind of frustration that drives people into any kind of, radicalization. Like that is one of the, biggest, easiest ways to, that's why,
Well, that's how you radicalize anyone is,
yeah.
Here's something that you don't have, and I've got a reason why you don't have it, and now we need to go solve for that.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And especially, it's usually, I think, in most countries it's an economic issue, but whereas here it's like this, I don't even know, it's a weird cultural thing that has happened, because, we're not, it's not that hard to get a job. It's not like we have this, huge population of impoverished young men. It's just that they're socially losers.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in other countries, it's just like if you can barely afford to eat, then you probably can't afford a girlfriend. So, here's a gun and or a vest, and go blow yourself up, and then virgins and vagina. You'll get that prize. And I see it as the kind of the same, just the same desperation that leads to that kind of, just insanity.
It's despair. What am I doing with my life?
Yeah. If your life is meaningless, then any meaning that someone can attach to it is better than none.
Right. And so people just don't have that support network to be able to, I guess, to get laid.
Yeah. It's so, well, I guess,
But then we want to outlaw prostitution.
Yeah.
Come on, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes so much sense. Here, I'd imagine it's similar there. There's, escorts don't really get bothered, because they're not, walking the street and in anybody's face, and they're more discreet and all that. Because here, that's, you can pay someone to hang out with you, and whatever you do while you're hanging out is your own business between you and that person, but you just can't directly pay them for, it's illegal to specifically say, I am giving you this money to fuck me. So it's kind of a ridiculous loophole, but it's a ridiculous law to begin with, so...
It is. It is totally ridiculous, especially when you look at, I don't know. So I'm just going to expose
all of human history. You can just look at that.
All of human history, but
it's been around since people have.
Right.
It's been around way longer than money or even civilization or cities or any of that. You can go I think as soon as language and kind of community established itself, or maybe even before language, at some point there was some half-ate guy who was like, hey, I have this extra piece of fruit, and you have this thing that I want, and was able to indicate that somehow. It's just ridiculous to be like, no, we're turning that off. And I think America, it seems, held on to the kind of Victorian ridiculous morality longer.
It's the the Protestant.
Right, yeah, the Puritan kind
Yeah,
of.
exactly. So there's,
Yeah, you are a nation of religious fanatics. I do forget that sometimes.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
not all of
yeah.
us. You know,
No,
we
no, I
have a
mean,
new religion now, and it's called the Constitution. Not everyone has jumped on board with that, unfortunately. But
yeah. That's. I actually think. I mean, if you look at, say, the example of like Rome, where they didn't have a constitution in the same sense, but they had the common law, and they had sort of tradition and an expectation of how how the government should behave, how eventually how an emperor should behave, what senators were supposed to do. Like, if you didn't live up to those things, then you were considered a failure according to, it was like your whole culture and then it became the part of the state religion
right. So
before
that
Christianity.
was all based on, and so they had a lot of good ideas that have pervaded into modern society. But one of the problems that I think that they had was that they had this idea of a Senate and representation, etc. But what they didn't really have was, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure that somebody will in the comments or in the thread on the forums, but they didn't really have the idea of suffrage. So
No,
like
but they did have the
you
idea
couldn't
of
choose who the
consent.
emperor was, and you really couldn't choose who the senator was. You just had to kind of rely on these people to do the right thing. And
Well,
so
sort of, but if the emperor pissed off, like, say, more than a few senators or more than half the population, then things would happen like riots while you're in the middle of, you know, some games you're putting on to try and stop them from being pissed off. This happened a few times, and I mean, there's times where emperors just got, like, torn to pieces by the mob. And that was like Rome had that, unlike, say, the European kings that came after, where it was like, by divine right of God I rule, right? So it wasn't by, because the gods like me, but also you do, so you're not going to overthrow me. And there was some expectation that if you didn't do your job, then somebody's gonna fucking kill you. I'm not saying that's a good system. I think it was a little bit, better than just like, I rule because God says I'm a great guy, and also my son's going to, and his son forever. So it, but my point about the Constitution was more, not that we should try and be like Rome was, but just in the sense that they were able to carry that with them, that sense of, like, what is right, as a and apply it practically to their government in a way that it kind of interwove the religion with the state, but in a somewhat rational way. And I think America has a new opportunity to do that in a way that other countries don't, because their constitutions are just, I mean, like ours, it's weak. It it provides a lot of protections and stuff, but there's also and by an act of parliament, the prime minister can just override the constitution in any way that he wants.
well, but by an act of parliament, so you've got two branches of government involved there.
This would be like if just the House, not the Senate, and not the president, could just vote one time, majority vote, not even like super majority, nothing like that, and boom, they amended the Constitution.
Okay, so I would consider that to be wrong, right?
Yeah, it's well, and the thing is, no one has ever done it yet, but I don't know why they put it in there. They said it's called the notwithstanding clause, And so they can just say, notwithstanding the Constitution, we're going to do this anyway. And then go ahead and do whatever. Like they talked about doing it for gay marriage when the Supreme Court said that it wasn't constitutional to deny the rights of gay people to get married, and the conservatives basically said, well, we should just invoke the notwithstanding clause, and then who cares? And then they lost election after election, and they kind of figured out that was a bad idea, I guess.
Well, yeah, because you still got a whole bunch of religious assholes up there like we do down here.
Yeah, we do for sure. And it's like I forget sometimes, but I spent some time living in Alberta, which is like our Texas. I mean, it's oil, it's ranches, it's cowboys, and it's a bunch of like, just like guns and trucks and I don't know. I mean,
is that where they shoot that silly show that I've been watching here and there? That what is it? Kilkenny or
Letterkenny?
Letterkenny, yeah, that's it.
I'm not sure if it's there or.
No, we gotta look that up. Hold on, let's bring it up. Letterkenny, I think that's how it's spelled. Letterkenny, give me something. Here we go. TV series. Dun dun dun.
Oh no,
Listowel, Ontario. So that's a different province.
It's Ontario, but that would be like.
Oh, that's like Michigan. That's like Detroit.
Yeah, but yeah, that's kind of it's it's farms. It's like that the small towns that are in that part of Ontario. It's a pretty redneck area. It's funny because you're like, as soon as you're hour or two away from Toronto, you're into the rednecky kind of farmland. But I guess like is New York like that? Like you get
there are parts of New York like that. So when people talk about New York, they usually are just thinking about New York City.
Well, yeah, but like upstate New York.
But yeah, once you get out of the city, much of New York is extremely rural.
Right.
You talk about like Finger Lakes and stuff like that. It's a big wine producing region. Lots of farming. Lots of agriculture and stuff like that going on. So
okay, yeah. So that'd be similar to Southern Ontario there. Although, as soon as you go like a little bit northwest there, you are into absolute wilderness. There's nobody and nothing. Like there's the odd like native reserve and just a lot of bugs and swamp and there's a reason why not a lot of people go there. Although, once climate change kicks in a little harder, then that is part of the world that people might actually want to live in. So silver lining.
Yeah, like we got all this uninhabited land, and everyone's worried about Florida sinking. Like, who gives a fuck? Stuff changes. We have to go and adapt, and that is what has made humanity great: is our ability to adapt.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I would love to see us transition to a greener economy. I like that we get a lot of our power here from like hydroelectricity, so we we don't have to like burn anything in most communities in my province. But I also see the necessity of continuing to use the technology we have until it's obsolete.
Right, but you still have a fireplace, right?
No,
No?
Yeah, I would like to, but it's kind of a pain to put one in if you don't know. If like my house didn't have one when I got it. And...
Oh, that kind of sucks. I don't have one either, and it's so tonight it's like so I'm in Texas. And it's going to freeze here tonight. And I don't have a fireplace, so I actually had to turn the heat on today for the first time.
God, that's horrible.
Yeah.
But
here's so kind of where I was going with that is, either you're paying someone for some sort of energy in order to heat your home, or you're just throwing logs in the fireplace.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, it's funny. Although I think they skew these statistics a little bit, but the air quality in the valley that I live in is like during the wood burning season it's like top 3 worst in North America, I think. And just for like particulates, but it's wood, right? It's not like
it's not like real CO2. It's
well, I've never found wood smoke nearly as offensive as if you you're burning like diesel or something. It's kind of gross to breathe that in. I mean, not that you want to sit over top a bonfire and fill your lungs, but if you catch a whiff of it, it's not like ugh. I think we're more accustomed to it because we spent a lot of time around that as a species. But
look at those.
And there's something satisfying about just burning wood and seeing the fire and the kind of radiant heat that comes off of a wood stove. And
they've got an app for that now. I actually have. So instead of having a fireplace, I've got one of those fake perspective looking things with the LED lights that flicker and whatever. Yeah. And then it's got like a built-in electric heater,
electric heater
with a blower that blows out the heat, and it does a good job, but it's not the real thing, right? You don't get the smell, you don't get the popping and crackling, and
exactly.
And you don't get the radiant heat. So one of the cool things about having a well-engineered fireplace or a wood burning stove or something like that is that as the materials themselves heat up, so you're not just taking heat energy from the fire itself, but that fire is also warming the structure in which it lives.
A big, heavy piece of iron. It stays warm for hours after the fire goes out.
Right.
So if you can let the fire go out when you go to bed, kind of thing, and you'll still have heat for a while,
right,
at night. And it's just it feels nicer. It's nice to you get close to it, and it's so warm, and I don't know. There's something kind of romantic about wood burning fire, but I just I don't mind using the electric. It's all right. I prefer gas over electric for cost, but obviously it's not as good for the environment.
Well, natural gas is not.
It's not too bad.
It's not too bad. So that's what I have. I got 2 furnaces, one for the upstairs, one for the downstairs. And right now I got them at 65, I think. So I'm still kind of bundled up right now. But
okay, so 65, that's like...
Oh, yeah, don't make me do the math. I don't know, it's like, what, 18 maybe? Hold on, let's see.
Okay, yeah, 18, okay. So, yeah, that's...
Wow, off the top of my head, that was pretty good.
Yeah, I would not have gotten that. I mean... well, see, what I like about Celsius is that at 0, that's when water freezes. It makes it,
Yeah, but so
I just.
I mean, it's just
why that wouldn't be 0.
It's just this ridiculous idea that hey, we want everything to be rectified to a factor of 10. That's the only thing with the metric system that I have a problem with, because the difference between Celsius and Fahrenheit it's a linear difference. Like it's not like it's a different scale. It's just a different nomenclature.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, well, it just, all that annoys me really is, I mean, I almost never practically have to worry about converting except for when I'm having a conversation like this. But
where is it?
But it is so annoying when you're working on something and it's American, so it's mostly, standard, and then they just throw something metric in there just to be pieces of shit.
Yeah.
And and nobody else does that. It's metric. Well, actually, I guess Canada. We're the only ones. I'm pretty sure. I don't think I don't think Britain does that anymore. Everybody else gave up on it.
Yeah. I mean, I really don't care other than, Fahrenheit is what I've been socialized with my whole life.
Oh, yeah. For the temperature thing, yeah, exactly. It's just whatever you learn you're comfortable with. Oh, yeah, it's funny, actually. I think the temperature here is about the same as it is there right now.
Wow, that's crazy. Hold on. So let me see what it is right here, right now. I use Weather Underground. This is if nobody's familiar with Weather Underground, this is crowdsourced, so you can actually select a local weather station, right? So there's people in my neighborhood that have weather stations that report their data into the program, right? So I'm picking something that's really close to me, and right now it's 41.
Okay, and here it is 39.
Yeah, so that's almost exactly. That's crazy.
Yeah,
and we're 2,000 miles apart.
I knew this. Yeah, I got I've got an uncle that is working in Texas, so he was posting about he was like, oh, it's getting cold here, and then I was like, okay, yeah, right, it's Texas, and then I was like, oh, okay, it's actually, this isn't cold because I've lived in Alberta, that's fucking cold, but being oh man, there was times there where I was just like, why did people live here? Why would you, if you came to this spot from anywhere else that's around it, why wouldn't you just keep going? I was there because there's oil there, but they didn't have oil. It was there was some buffalo and stuff, but I'm pretty sure there was animals further south where it didn't suck. But yeah, when the wind is blowing there and it's already minus 30 or 40, so I don't know what that would be in that. Let's see. So minus 20 or actually minus 40 is minus 40 there. So imagine minus 40 and then you got a bunch of wind. So with wind chill, it's let's see. I remember one day.
It's got to be in the single digits.
It was minus 75.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and because it's because of the wind. So the wind, it feels like you are getting stabbed through your zipper in your coat. It just, anywhere the moving air touches you is you're just feeling like you're on fire. It immediately starts fucking you up. Within a couple minutes, you can get frostbite on exposed skin. So
no, you get that burning in your lungs.
Yeah. I would put a full respirator on to go outside sometimes, just because it would heat the air up slightly before it, and then my face would be shielded from the wind. Because even a balaclava, it was my eyes would feel like they're gonna bleed. And
yeah, that's.
You just instantly start watering. You can barely see anything. You're trying to squint, but it's all watery and.
Well, that's
So,
what I
yeah.
really dug about working in Toronto was I would get up in the morning. So I started working there like maybe a week before Canadian Thanksgiving, which was what, about 2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, back that up, 2 decades or whatever. But so I would get up in the morning and I would go downstairs all the way to the basement. And then it's like an entire shopping mall, and you can get to half of the city underground, and you never have to put on a winter coat or anything like that. You're just wearing your suit. You walk over, and
that's not bad. That's, but also, I mean, in like it does get pretty cold there once in a while, but it's not like for 4 months straight kind of thing. I don't think like I've never lived there, but when I went there in like it was still winter in Alberta, but then once I got there, it was like the snow had melted and it was like spring. So and you actually have like 4 seasons there in southern Ontario. Like in Alberta, there's snow and then like rain, like thunder showers, and then you have like 2 weeks somewhere in the July or August where it's like okay, and then you're back to like what like 1 year when I was there at the end of August it snowed. And that's one of those times where I was like what the fuck, why are we here? And then the oil crash happened and I got the fuck out of there, like ugh. That I was not there for the scenery. And I mean, the culture there was like the Bible thumping, like I had to hide that I smoked weed because everybody would think I was like, dabbling in Satan's lettuce if they knew. Like it was just, like at the one place where I worked, it was a village of 300 people on the like sort of northern half of like Alberta and Saskatchewan, like just that's like the windswept plain where it gets just stupidly cold because of the wind and the fact that it's like hell on earth. And it was just bizarre, like the I mean, there was this guy. He was like that I worked with, or he was like the owner that had retired. He was an old mechanic. He was like 85, and he would unironically drop the N-bomb, like not even in a way where he was like trying to be racist or anything. Like that's just the way that he had learned to talk, and he never changed. And I mean, I would just, I don't know. I mean, it was like going back in time. And that was socially acceptable to everybody around him because they were all racist. And, like, I forgot until I moved there. Like, I remembered when I was a kid, things being like that in certain communities, but I lived, in BC where it's pretty like liberal and there's a lot of hippies on the south coast here, that that moved here because the weather's nice and stuff compared to the rest of Canada. So it just rains a lot, but it's like Seattle or wherever.
Right.
But it's pretty mild. It doesn't snow too much. And anyways, being around all these like liberal-minded people, then going back to that, it was like, oh shit, this still exists. Like I forgot. I mean, I thought like that's something on TV that happens in Alabama. Like I didn't actually remember that we have like that part of Alberta and like Saskatchewan and.
Well, yeah, I mean, you got to remember, like, especially in a close knit community like that, that.
Well, attitudes don't change very fast. Right?
Exactly.
Like, yeah. Like,
so, like,
because you just don't have new ideas coming in much, and when they do, they're like, oh man, I didn't realize there's a few like pretty like sort of racially divided communities that I lived in growing up, and I didn't know, like, I didn't understand that because that wasn't the way it was where I had come from in BC. And so I didn't know that if you were white, then if you play with the native kids, then the white kids don't play with you anymore.
Oh, see that? So that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, and it was like, I mean, there was the native section, and they had their own ball diamond of the playground, and there was like a dividing line, and nobody. I mean, I wonder if at some point it had been like that was a rule, but I know that it wasn't by the time I got there. But everybody, I mean, it was unspoken, but that was the case. On the other hand, though, they did have a really like strong sense of like family honor and morality. So like when I one time I got ganged up on and a couple of kids beat me up. Like not really awful. We were like 9 or 10, and but it wasn't fair, and it was kind of shitty what they did. And so, I came home and I was beat up, and my mom asked what happened, and I was like, well, these two kids beat me up, and then she, because everybody knows everybody, she went and talked to their parents, and they got like whipped. and they came,
and that's just insult to injury, because now these kids freaking hate you.
No, you know what though? It wasn't like they just got whipped. They got like verbally, like this was like, how dare you bring dishonor on our family? Like, how dare you embarrass us in public like this? Like, these were prominent families in the community. They were, their dads were like respected businessmen and farmers, like, they prided themselves on the reputation of being like, like good sportsmen and fair and, dealing with people politely and all that kind of crap. So if you were going to fight, that's fine, but you fight one-on-one. And so like, the times where I got in fights that were fair, nothing happened, and that was it. But it was actually funny, like they were not dicks after that.
Oh,
because they had got it was, I think, the guilt as opposed to the beating that probably motivated that, because they just acted very embarrassed, like and so I think that like that's something that we've sort of lost in like cosmopolitan societies, is by, I think, kind of by adapting to each other's cultures, we've lost some of our more traditional values, which is in a lot of ways good, because a lot of them are shit. But then I think there's been some throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because I think like that idea that you shouldn't do shitty things because you should care about what other people think of you.
Right. And so that's where at least Christianity and Judaism provide a lot of guidance along those lines, is to say, here's things that you shouldn't do. And so, yeah, granted, they had, ulterior motives at the time. They were trying to manipulate the populace and trying to get power. But the way that they did that was to say, hey, if you, I don't know, eat shellfish, you might get sick because we don't have medicine.
Yeah,
they didn't know that they didn't have medicine. They just knew that if you ate shellfish, you would get sick. So that's why it's a prohibition.
Yeah, and I kind of wondered about like with pork, like trichinosis. I mean, if that would have been like you didn't really understand why you had to cook pork more than other meat, then you'd get sick, right? Like you don't want a rare pork chop.
Right. And so also a lot of that has been mitigated. So well, in the United States anyway, right? So we have the FDA, And they have all these rules and regulations that govern how you raise your livestock, that really mitigate against a lot of those things. So, even though there is like a common wisdom, like, beef has to be cooked to this temperature and pork has to be cooked to this temperature and chicken has to be cooked to this temperature, in reality, because of the rules and regulations that the industry has, if you're buying like store-bought chicken, or actually pork is a really good example of this, right? So you mentioned the trichinosis. So with pork, typically you would say, okay, 165, and, that's basically, you're not seeing any red blood. It's gray through and through, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But that doesn't work from a culinary perspective. For if you really want to get the best flavor out of your pork, you can actually go, like a 145 to 150 range, and you're still a little bit pink and got a little blood in there. You're not going to have that problem because these pigs that they're raising in a controlled environment.
Yeah, they're never allowed to develop that issue.
Right.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, then you've got the free range stuff where they're like, oh yeah, just go out and do whatever you want, and then we'll kill you humanely. And so that's kind of a paradigm shift there. Now you've got a situation, you've reintroduced a situation that is potentially hazardous. I don't know. It's all craziness.
Yeah. It is funny. Although, I've eaten, I hunt. My sister has a small farm, and she raises animals to slaughter, but they're all free range. And she is a vet tech, and she pays pretty close attention to their health and so on, but it's not a totally controlled, environment. Like, they do have, they're protected, but not from everything, right? Like, they're out in the open, and other animals kind of, can get through there sometimes and stuff, so they have some exposure to, whatever's out there. But here, like, that's, like, it's, you can't buy the, I think you have to buy the live animal. It has to be yours, I think, to, you can't be selling, stuff that you butcher yourself. So, so they can buy the animal off you and then take it to the butcher, basically. That's the idea. But it's, that's pretty far and few between still. Most people get their meat from the grocery store, but that's a growing demand. Actually, for that kind of thing, rabbit is the best return on your investment, I think.
What, if you're going to raise them yourself?
Yeah, you can get a lot of meat out of rabbits. For they have a lot of babies. They, per pound of meat that you get, you're not putting in an insane amount of food. Like, the cost of raising them is, it's like similar to chickens, right? So, and maybe a little bit more meat, because you can grow pretty big rabbits. I never knew that until, like, she did that, but it's not bad. It's the meat's pretty good, and I find, like, the quality of the meat of free range animals is better. Like, it tastes better. They get to move around, and they're not like.
Well, they're consuming a natural diet, right?
Yeah.
So there's from what I found is that you tend to get a little bit more of maybe a, I don't know. Well, yeah, I'll say it like a gamier kind of flavor. It's
Yeah.
got more oomph to it, right? When you eat,
Exactly. Yeah. It's more flavorful. Like, I mean, like the factory farm chickens where like that breast meat where like, and I don't know if you've seen what those chickens look like, but the way they bred them, like their breasts just get so big that they can barely walk. They're like waddling around, and they just look so pathetic when they get to like. By the time they're adults, they're just this warped like abortion of a thing that we've made.
right?
And
But it tastes so good.
well, it tastes good if you prepare it right. But I mean that the really like
There's only one way to do it. Like with farm raised chicken, there's only one way to, or like what you're talking about, mass produced chicken.
Yeah.
The only thing you can really do with that is fry it up.
Yeah.
But it's so good. It's so good.
Yes. That will. I mean, deep frying makes anything.
Everything.
Pretty awesome.
I've had deep fried turkey for Thanksgiving, and that was the best turkey that I have ever had.
Yeah, I haven't
because
tried
like
that yet.
so what happens in any other cooking method? What happens as you're cooking the meat? You're losing a lot of the water to evaporation during the cooking process.
Right.
But when you fry it, you're keeping all of that water locked inside.
It's held in because it won't mix with the oil. Even if it turns to steam, it'll kind of reconstitute itself.
So what I've done with turkey a few times, and we're not big turkey eaters. None of us really like it. But I had a friend that was a professional chef. And he said what you should do is take a bunch of citrus, like lemons, limes, oranges, and make like, maybe like 1/8 inch to 3/16 inch slices of the citrus, and you stuff it in between the skin and the meat all over. So against the breast and everything. So, the way you cook it is, back down or whatever. And you stick all of this in there, and it provides this like insulation against that evaporation.
Yeah. And it would also tenderize it, right? The acid.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and some flavor and stuff. That's cool.
Wow,
yeah, I've never deep fried one, and I don't know. I mean, had a few good turkeys and a few that weren't as good. It's yeah, I don't know. It's kind of hit or miss for me, like baking them. And if they're overdone at all, then it's just sad. Like because they can be a little bit tough to begin with. They're a little bit chewier than like chicken, and then if you overdo it, it's like, just. I mean, you can still make a decent sandwich later, but
that's what Thanksgiving is all about, is leftovers.
Yeah, it is, and just general gluttony.
Mm-hmm.
Eating way. I mean, I actually this past Thanksgiving I kind of decided that I would rather just make a smaller, like just have a chicken and a ham and screw or like a few and a roast, like have a bigger meal, but without making this ridiculous thing.
Right. Yeah. So
and then also like not be like, cause I was just such a glutton. And then, I mean, it felt good for like 5 minutes and awful for 5 hours. Like,
yeah. So we do like tapas, and so we'll have like like lobster and shrimp and ham and like filet mignon and just all sorts of stuff. But we don't go for the traditional turkey or ham anymore for the most part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we have like lots of different food, and we serve it all day throughout the day, instead of having like the one giant meal. And so that's kind of our tradition now, because it's not about the food.
Yeah, it's spending time with each other, right?
Right.
And just enjoying, like, I think there is something to be said for making something really tasty that you then share. And everybody gets to enjoy it, and it's it's a shared happy experience. Like even the food part is. So it's the company, and then having that, and it makes for, well, or at least it can, because oh man, I've had some awkward Thanksgivings with like in-laws.
I think that's a requirement.
Well, yeah. Although now it's like I just don't really care as much. Like, I'm not gonna get embarrassed. If other people feel awkward, that's unfortunate for them. I'm not worried about it. So if I say something that pisses someone off, then that's just too
Well,
bad.
also, if you're going to be awkward, who better to be awkward with than your family?
Yes, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just, I mean, like, when you got like when you involve in-laws, it's not just your family, then it's so.
Those are the best.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, because then you do have that offer. I mean, like, your own family, they've heard all your bullshit before. It's gonna be pretty hard to, like, really, get them riled up, because they're gonna see it coming a mile away. But someone that doesn't know you quite as well, but they still have to be part of that intimate conversation with you, like, you're gonna tell them what you really think, then it can be a lot more fun. Just, not always for everybody.
Well, all right. So this seems like a good opportunity to take a break, because we've been at this for 90 minutes, which is pretty amazing. Yeah. But okay. I do need to deal with those kid issues that we kind of talked about before. So I'm super glad that we got the opportunity to finally do this after, all of our trials and tribulations. And, thank you so much for coming on. I'm looking forward to doing, because we still got a lot more to talk about, I feel. So we got to do this again sometime really soon. I want to try and do this episode. So what this is called Members Only. So this is just forum members coming on, and we're just shooting the shit and talking about whatever. Obviously there's opportunities that we'll look at bringing various members on for the quote unquote official broadcast. And that's where we really tackle the kind of bullshito meat and mission on those kind of shows. So would love to have you on one of those at some point in the future. So we'll figure that out. But I would definitely enjoy having you back on this show at basically any time. And, so this wasn't even scheduled tonight. I was just like, hey, what the fuck? Let's go. Let's do it. Yeah. And here you were. So great.
Yeah, right on. And I just also have to say, Antifa is a dirty communist. and Frost is kind of a borderline communist sympathizer at this point, and I'm very disappointed.
No, he's not. We can go into that in a whole different episode. I don't want to talk about other people too much, but
drop that turd into the end of the conversation. But,
you know what? And I told him that we're on tonight, so I'm sure he's listening.
Great. Okay.
All right, sweet. Thanks a lot, man. I appreciate it. This has been members only with some messenger and Roidie McDouchebag. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you sometime soon. Make sure you like, hit subscribe, do whatever so that you do not miss the next episode. And we will see you then. Thanks.